Hello and welcome to this talk. Friends, the aim of this presentation is to put before you some ideas about the great principle called truth, as it is understood in the non-dual teachings. Our purpose is not just theoretical, it is highly practical. For if we can grasp the meaning of truth in this context and take up the inner practices that are recommended, our mind will be led to a higher state of consciousness. So let us confront the deep question, what is truth? As many of you know from your own studies of these teachings, truth ultimately transcends words. It refers to the supreme experience of completeness and perfection. This experience is supreme because it banishes all fear, doubt, and sorrow. Our consciousness is established in security and fulfillment. This idea of truth as the ultimate experience is on a different level to our everyday understanding of truth. As we know, truth is normally linked with moral qualities such as sincerity, honesty, and truth speaking. It also goes deeper than logical or legal ideas about truth, such as the idea of truth being that which corresponds to the facts, or that which is coherent and free from contradictions. And this quest for ultimate truth is something more profound than the scientists' search for the truths about the physical universe. What about the meaning of truth as it is expressed in religion and philosophy? For religions, truth usually means the key teachings upheld by that religion. So if we follow a particular faith, we are expected to believe that its teachings are good and true because they come from God. As regards philosophy, truth is never final, but it may well be acceptable for the time being as the intellectual presentation we feel is most convincing and probable. But in both cases, religion and philosophy, the great experience mentioned before of completeness and perfection that banishes all fear, doubt, and sorrow, is usually assumed to be beyond the range of our normal understanding. So, allowing for some exceptions, there is a widely held conviction that it is not given to us human beings to experience ultimate truth while we are still living in this world. If higher truth is knowable at all, it is a mystery that may be revealed to us after we leave the body. This humble recognition of the apparent limits of our human intelligence is expressed in the lines of the poet Tennyson. Strong Son of God, immortal love, whom we that we have not seen thy face, by faith and faith alone embrace, believing where we cannot prove. Believing where we cannot prove. But the non-dual teachings hold that there is a means to realize the supreme truth in our own being and while we are still alive. It is here and now in this very life that we are meant to engage in this inquiry into our true nature. This realization brings something more than proof. That something more is direct experience of reality. Direct because reality turns out to be the true nature of our own self. This doesn't mean we can grasp the ultimate truth by means of our intellect or by some clever manipulation of thought. Such truth is only realized after a good deal of dedicated effort. And this effort is challenging because it involves re-examining the way we think in order to awaken our highest potentialities. So we learn how to detect and then free ourselves from it. We free ourselves from anything in our thinking that keeps our understanding superficial, unsympathetic, and limited. That effort involves training our own mind in a certain way. That way is the way of peace and harmony, based on our growing appreciation of the non-dual perspective. For most people, this is a new field for our exploration. It seems unfamiliar because ultimate truth is pure, formless, unchanging, and quite different from our experience of life up to now. But once we have made a start on this path of self-inquiry, our feeling of unfamiliarity will be replaced by a growing sense of recognition and homecoming. So our path to truth realization turns out to be the means of fulfilling our need for that illumined understanding that satisfies forever, the knowledge of what we truly are. Does this mean the path is an easy one to follow? If we have a true idea of its value and importance and give it due priority, our progress can be steady and straightforward. What makes things difficult and complicated is when our mind goes on seeking lasting fulfillment through the outer possibilities provided by the world. This isn't because such pursuits are wrong, but they tend to monopolize our attention, making it hard for us to turn our thoughts to the inner quest for enlightenment. Another obstacle to our deeper inner quest, perhaps the main one, is that most of us tend to develop, quite reasonably, what is sometimes called a comfort zone. By this is meant a range of habits and practices, a lifestyle with which we feel at home and in which we take refuge, knowingly or unknowingly. But the question is, what causes us to seek a change from this well-established position? It is our deeper need to expand and transcend limitations as part of our higher evolution. We begin to suspect that our psychological safe haven is not so safe after all, because it leaves unresolved the deeper issues of life. So there comes a point when we no longer feel at home in this cocoon of habits, and we become seekers of truth. Our deeper needs press upon us and create the urge to expand our consciousness beyond its present boundaries. In fact, we can look upon this need for a way of inner development as our entry into the ultimate comfort zone, the only true means of refuge and safety. For it is based not on depending on outer supports, but on independently investigating the truth about our own nature. Let us now ask, how can we put these ideas into practice so that they can be a real and ongoing source of help in our life? I thought we would look at 3 practical ideas that will set in motion that expansion of consciousness for which we are now ready. Our first practical idea has already been referred to. It is the value of creating peace and harmony in ourselves. We tend to take it for granted that our mind has to be active and busy. It is by means of the active use of our intelligence that our powers and capacities are awakened and developed. Our universities are not meant to be retreats or monasteries, but places where we use our brains to the utmost. Sometimes we work specifically to qualify for a good job. Sometimes our concern is to develop a good mind, a mind that is intellectually rich and also inspired by fellow feeling and goodwill generally. But there is one form of research and development that is not usually included in our curriculum. What is this missing skill? It is how to create peace of mind and how to detect the inner source of happiness through that peace. How to create peace of mind and how to detect the inner source of happiness through that peace. Such considerations may seem to have little relevance to our practical life, but in fact, nothing is more relevant. For even in our everyday pursuits, even in our work in the world, we are forever thirsting for a state of happiness and juggling with circumstances in an effort to escape every kind of pain and restriction. It's not very helpful to be told, just take things as they come, it will all work out. We need to know how to practice the means to inner peace and happiness, not just as a one-off, but in a way that will prove progressive. This is one of the reasons why we stress the need to allow some time for meditation and quiet reflection every day. These practices will ensure our mental well-being and inner growth. For it is we ourselves who have the means to train our mind in inner peace. We ourselves can uncover a new resilience, an inner source of strength and a reliable refuge. But there is much more to this development than psychological self-help. For you remember, in this context, truth is experienced not only as the ultimate happiness and peace. This higher knowledge dispels all fear, sorrow, and ignorance. The fact revealed in meditation is that in this intelligent and goal-directed stillness of mind, faculties within us of higher understanding will stir to life. These powers don't come from outside us. They are released within the depth of our being when we are ready to welcome this revelation. The key word is readiness. For even in spiritual matters, we rest in our comfort zone, where we comfort ourselves with the belief that we know it all already. This means that whatever teaching we are given, our automatic response is, of course, of course. Then to ignore the instructions, slip back into our comfort zone and do it my way. But whether or not we take the new opportunities available to secure our further advance, it is in the inner peace, harmony, and silence that the highest and most liberating knowledge of all reveals itself in our prepared mind. Then what again is that knowledge? This will be our second guiding idea. It is the recognition that knowledge of truth is self-knowledge. This may seem a rather unexciting statement that doesn't say very much. Compare it with the words said by the astronaut when stepping onto the moon. One small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind. What can self-knowledge do for mankind? Compared with that bold act of outer exploration, the search for knowledge of truth within our own being seems lame and unpromising. And yet, as another poet has put it, presume not the heavens to scan, the proper study of mankind is man. Until we know more about the source and root of our own nature, our steps, our leaps in understanding the universe will not satisfy our deepest needs. So we come back to our second guiding idea. The knowledge of truth is the knowledge of the nature of our true self. Actually, the nature of the self has been given close attention by many philosophers since ancient times. In the East, for example, each school of thought had a different view of self. And the variations include the assertion that there is no such thing as self. It is just a convenient idea conjured up in the mind. But why is it that the nature of the self is a theme worth exploring? It is because this is what we identify with, what we think we are. And what we think we are does have the closest connection with our happiness and our sense of life's possibilities. Even on a common sense level, we can recognize some of the ways in which the word self is used or implied. Most obviously, it applies to our body and our mind. But our sense of a bodily self is easily extended to include our appearance in general, our clothing, cosmetics, bodily decorations, tattoos, and so on. This same extension of self-feeling applies even more comprehensively to our mind. Our thoughts, however purposeful or trivial, are felt to be uniquely ours. They are part of our sense of selfhood, and this is sustained all through life. Even though our thoughts are so transient, we generally feel continuity with the mind we had as an infant. And this sense of living in and with the same mind will go on as long as we live. So our sense of identification with our mind extends across time, for it embraces our whole lifetime. And we also extend our sense of selfhood in space. We do this by thinking in terms not just of me, but of mine, my property, my family, my office, my car, my desk, my staff. All these connections seem to be part of ourself. They produce identity feeling, and if our feelings are positive, they are received into our comfort zone. Our selfhood also extends into the things we know about, that we have expert knowledge of. So our sense of identity based on me and mine seems to be firmly grounded in our body and mind. But is our self really implicated or involved in the life that is expressing itself through our body and mind? The self reveals and supports that life, but it does so from a unique position. The non-dual teaching emphasizes that the self is not the body and mind, but the changeless consciousness that reveals and illumines them. And this changeless consciousness alone, self-illumined, is the essence and reality of our being. All the details we've mentioned, the body and its appearance, the coming and going of thoughts, our relatedness with other people, our property, the contents of our knowledge, all these things are transient details that come and go in a world characterized by coming and going. They are not self-illumined. Body, mind, and the world need the light of self in order to be known. But the self needs only its own light, its own consciousness to reveal everything else. The point is that our true self is not just a little bit different from the rest of us. It is totally different as light from darkness. As such, the self never has a real, concrete connection with the rest of experience. It is ever free, illumined, pure, immutable, absolute. And the teaching is that we are fundamentally that self. Our true self, therefore, is the hidden support and revealer of all our experience, and is established in total freedom from the limitations and details that characterize the world of change. Of course, to help our growing understanding, we can look on the world and our individual life as depending for its existence and appearance on the supporting presence of the self and on the revealing light of the self. But the non-dual teachings always remind us that the self in reality is independent and absolute. So the guiding thought here is that knowledge of truth is self-knowledge. Get to know thoroughly that which is nearest to you, and you will know the essence of everything. Know yourself, strive to realize the reality at the core of your being, and you will know what is true about the reality at the core of all being. It is the same principle indicated by William Blake in his lines: to see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. What we hold close by in the palm of our hand, so to say, is our true self, the innermost self, the deepest point of our being and consciousness. This leads us to our third and final guiding thought. Myself is the witness of the mind and its thoughts. Myself is the changeless consciousness that witnesses the ever-changeful mental activities. There are two ways forward if we want to turn this observation into a guiding light. One way, as we have seen, is meditation, in order to create peace, harmony, and stillness in our mind. And in that serenity, deeper facets of our being will begin to awaken. The other way forward is self-inquiry or self-examination. Meditation, self-inquiry. How does it work? When we turn within in self-examination, we need to stay focused enough to sense the difference between the unchanging light of consciousness and the ever-changing pictures that move before it. This discrimination should be possible. After all, there is a real sense in which we are the owners of our mind and are in a unique position to influence its activities. Therefore, why should we be hesitant to exercise a bit of scrutiny or supervision now and then? The mind's workings are not really a secret to us, they are owner. So let's remind ourselves of the sort of events that characteristically take place in the inner world of the mind. This will enable us to look at our thoughts more objectively and loosen our sense of being identified with these passing appearances. What happens is, thoughts appear, they sometimes stay long enough to allow us to be clearly aware of their content. But generally, the precise form of the thought is always changing even as we look. Within a few seconds or sooner, the thought has become something different or has been replaced by a new thought. So even if we can't control these thoughts, at least we can see that they behave in a certain way. The key question to ask ourselves is, to whom or to what in me are the thoughts appearing? Who is this inner audience of one consciousness before whom the thoughts unfold their stories? Who or what is this principle of awareness that sees my thinking process? It sees my thinking process like an inner revealing light. It knows my thinking process, yet is not affected by whatever the mind is thinking or feeling. This is something more than the thoughts. It is the unchanging consciousness that reveals the thoughts. What is the ultimate nature of this principle? Why doesn't it show itself as a thought? It simply witnesses. It simply sheds light on the thought activity. It is our true self. The superficial idea is that our mind is full of thoughts and our inner world is made up entirely of this thought material. But the non-dual inquiry gives attention to that dimension of our inner being to which the thoughts appear. That dimension, that level of experience which knows no limit. There are many kinds of thought that arise in our mind. Perceptions in response to stimuli, emotions, memories, intellectual insights, philosophical speculations, pangs of conscience, desires, anxieties, ego assertion, and so on. Our mind is often a complex mix of several of these functions. The self illumines them all, and in a sense provides the space that the thoughts need in order to appear and undergo their changes. The crucial fact is that it is impossible to find a limit or limitation in the self that witnesses the thoughts. Suppose 1 million people were to perform this self-examination, noting the rise, transformation, and fall of the thoughts. And suppose that each of these people was sensitive to the fact that the thoughts are revealed by an inner light that is not part of the thinking activity. Despite this multiplicity of minds, no limitation could ever be found in that witnessing principle. It transcends thought. It transcends time and place. For these divisions of time and space are organized by thought. Therefore, this witnessing consciousness is infinite, non-dual, complete and perfect. The one self in all, one in us all. In the Upanishad, it is called the seer of seeing, the knower of knowing. And the teaching is extended to affirm the oneness of this self in you, in me, in all. In the words of the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, there is no other seer but this, no other knower but this. The thoughts unfold their many stories, but the audience is the one consciousness without a second. As we have suggested, this inquiry into the source of our own being can't be resolved by our intellect. But there is an effective and traditional way forward. And as we said, that effort involves training our mind in a certain way. That way is the way of peace and harmony, based on our growing appreciation of the non-dual perspective. And you remember, this was our first guiding idea. The value of creating peace and harmony in the inner kingdom of our own mind. This includes self-examination or self-inquiry, focused basically on the question, what am I? And we looked into this in the context of our second guiding idea. Knowledge of truth is self-knowledge. This inquiry should lead us to the conviction that we are not identified with the body, the mind, the world, though we appear to be enclosed in these limitations. But we are in fact, as consciousness, free, and ever have been and ever shall be. And what this means was indicated with the help of our third and final guiding idea. Myself is the witness of the mind and its thoughts. We found that this principle in us, our consciousness, is not individualized at all, but is universal, eternal, infinite, transcendent, ever free, ever illumined, ever achieved. This is the ultimate fact, the whole truth about our nature. It is valid here and now, and is automatically recognized once we have fully learned how to discriminate the contents of our mind from the light that illuminates them. Thank you for your attention.